Azure AppFest. So we'll start our session now at 2 p.m. So with Azure AppFest, we are currently at the last session for AppFest. So thank you for joining the session today. So do note that these sessions are actually recorded, and going forward, you can view the recordings on demand as well. So some housekeeping rules here. So if you have any questions around anything, please feel free to raise them up throughout the sessions via the Q&A panel there. So there'll actually be a 10 minutes Q&A towards the end, whereby we'll address these questions, as well as a short 5 to 10 minutes demonstration of these Microsoft Sentinel features, which I'll be covering during this deck as well. All right, so hi everyone, so thank you for joining the session today again on Managing Security Posture with Microsoft Sentinel. My name is Michelle, and with me is my colleague Nicole. He will be helping out more on the Q&A segment. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to raise them there and we'll answer it together. Right, and then over here we have the link. We have our LinkedIn QRs as well, so feel free to scan them or connect with us, and we're happy to help answer any questions around cybersecurity within Azure that you might have. Okay, so I understand everyone is here for the whole Sentinel session, Sentinel product. But before I even get into Sentinel, let's first go over, what exactly are some of the challenges that organizations are facing, and then only then can you get better context about how the whole Sentinel product comes into play. So in today's context, organizations are actually faced with the very difficult task of protecting resources from increasing cyber threats, as well as, because we now have a multi-cloud platforms, we have our hybrid cloud. So how do we protect our resources across all these different platforms, like, our on-premise DCs, our multi-cloud CSPs, for example. So currently our data, users, as well as your IT resources, they are everywhere. And with the frequency and sophistications of the attacks ever growing, it gets even harder for the security team, right, to manage all of these resources. So just taking, for example, off the top of my head, the Log4j attack, which happens months back, nobody expected that would disrupt into our Christmas holidays as well. So that is just one example that we have on, how these attacks are increasingly getting more and more sophisticated as time goes by. So this in turn, right, also creates significant challenges for your security operations team, which are tasked with monitoring and protecting all these different IT resources. So on my next slide, I do have a list of challenges that Microsoft has identified, which the SecOps team actually face. So here's a list of challenges that we have identified that the security operations team are facing. So it is actually quite a wide variety of challenges. So this actually stems all the way from, when they are using the traditional SIEM, for example, do they, the traditional SIEMs these days just do not have that level of connectors, the amount of connectors available across the different cloud platforms, for example, or even, across from hybrid to cloud connectors. All these are not in place within a traditional SIEM environment. As well as some other difficulties faced, which we hear from the ground, which we hear from the security team, is actually around integration. So when we have so many different tools, third-party tools, we have our endpoint detection response tool, our CASBs, our cloud security posture management tool, as well as our cloud protection platform tool. So how do we ensure that all these are integrated properly? We didn't leave any of these tools out. And how do we ensure that they are not just working in silo? We need that level of visibility from all these tools, right? So there is another challenge faced within the security team. There's just too many things going on, too many products that they are currently using. Integration is very difficult on them. And then around the lack of visibility as well, when we onboard all this, are we lacking certain logs which we are not importing in? For example, there's no visibilities on this. And then we also have a high level of false positive occurrence, which actually in turn leads to more work being needed to be done by the security operations team, because they actually then need to qualify these events, qualify the incidents, and check whether, this particular incident which comes into the environment, is it a true or false positive? So all in all, it actually adds on, having the SIEM, the traditional SIEM piece, actually adds on a bit more work on our security operations team as well. And that is really where the whole Microsoft Sentinel comes into play. Right. So the star of today's session. So Microsoft Sentinel is our cloud native SIEM tool. It enables you to collect, store, and analyze all your security data from different cloud service providers, such as the Azure side, the AWS side, the GCP side. Everything can be linked via Microsoft Sentinel, and it can also work on a hybrid environment as well. So what does this mean? This means your on-prem DCs, they can actually have their log forwarded into Sentinel as well. So Sentinel then becomes your single pane of glass across all these different cloud service providers as well as your on-prem settings. Microsoft Sentinel is also able to scale automatically as your data ingestion increase, your compute need grows. These are not within your area of concern because you don't have to worry about capacity when it comes to Microsoft Sentinel. It's very different from the traditional on-prem setting. The traditional on-prem SIEM setting whereby you have to size up, a certain server rack, a certain server size, and then after that, going forward, you need to add on from there. It's very different from that sense. So with Microsoft Sentinel, you don't have to worry about the scaling. You can ingest as much data as required, as well as, including as much environment as you need to be monitored within Sentinel. So there is no infrastructure cost or upfront commitment when it comes to Microsoft Sentinel. You only pay for what you use. So it's like with all cloud infrastructures, with all cloud services, right? You only pay for what you use. And then with Microsoft Sentinel, the very good point about it is that, once you establish a good baseline, for example, going forward, I know that every day I'll ingest 100 GB of data. Then I can then think about ways to pivot towards a capacity reservation model to save a bit more on cost. So that is actually one of the good points about Sentinel, which you could take into consideration going forward. Sentinel also leverages upon AI and automation to deliver you value beyond that of a traditional SIEM environment. So what do I mean by this? So with the AI capabilities, it allows Sentinel to actually detect threats that may have otherwise been missed, as well as better qualify all these different events and incidents such that it actually significantly reduces the amount of false positives in our environment. So that is one of the value benefit which Sentinel gives is really about that AI, machine learning technology in place within the product. In turn, it also does better correlation of incidents, which then reduces alert fatigue for our security operations team. Because can you imagine if they are constantly qualifying all these different alerts? That in turn actually leads to a lot of alert fatigue for our team. So we don't want to stress them out on this end as well. Sentinel is also able to act as a security orchestration, automation, and response tool. So in short, we call this the SOAR tool. So what does this mean? This means that it allows us to apply automation to reduce the manual processes required, as well as speed up the response time to incidents that are recognized within Sentinel. So this in turn, similar to what I've been bringing across as the value proposition for Sentinel, reduces the amount of time which our security operations need to act upon all these different incidents. So you're also able to choose from the hundreds of built-in dashboards, hunting queries, analytics rule, and playbooks, which are available within Sentinel. And you're also able to build your own customized ones. So later on towards the end of the session, as mentioned, I have a short demonstration on how Sentinel works. I'll show it to everyone in live action, the things that you can choose, I think that everyone will get very excited from that point. So yep, let me go next about, the whole, how exactly the Sentinel works. So Sentinel operates with different phases. So let me walk through, how the Sentinel actually operate with respect to the individual phases. So firstly, on the left, we have the data collection phase. This is really where Sentinel starts. Okay, so we need to have all our data connectors set up so that data is being ingested into Sentinel. And do note that, like I mentioned, our data connectors, they work across multiple platforms. It's not just within Azure or within the M365 side of things. So next is around the whole monitoring and detecting piece. This is really where the analytics and intelligence capabilities are added onto the data ingested within the first phase, the data phase. And then we can also then add more workbooks, dashboards, hunting queries during this phase as well to make better sense of our data. So next is around the investigation phase. During the investigation phase, we are able to view correlated incidents and get a whole timeline of these incidents happening in our environment. So let's say it can date back from a week ago when the first attack started to happen, all the way till now, if everything has already been compromised, you actually get that whole timeline of, the impacted entities, what exactly happened on which date, and what are the respective events for that. and then you're able to then view things further, investigate things a little more from there. So next is around the whole automation piece. So, after all these incidents come into your environment, we are able to set up automation playbooks, which will run automatically. So this in turn reduces both the risk associated with the incidents as well as reduce the work required by our security operations team. And that is really on a high level of how these phases work individually. Next, I'll dive deeper into these individual phases so that you get better clarity around, how exactly Sentinel works and how it can benefit your environment. All right, so I'll first go through the data phase. This is the first and utmost and foremost important portion of Sentinel, because without that data going in, we can't operate Sentinel as well. Okay, so Sentinel actually offers us a one-click integration when it comes to the Azure and Microsoft solutions. So a side point for you to note is that ingestion of data via the native Microsoft solution is actually free. You don't have to pay for the data ingestion when it comes to the Azure or Microsoft solutions which you are trying to ingest data from. All right. So data connectors, take note of this term, data connectors. This is actually what links the data sources into Sentinel. So it's available not only just for the Azure and Microsoft 365 products, but also available across, the other CSPs, other cloud service providers, alongside your on-premise environment as well. So for your on-premise environment, there is support for the standard log formats like CF and syslogs. So you just have to configure your log forwarder to forward all this into Sentinel and things will work just fine. All right, and then REST API connectors are also available for custom log solutions which you have in place, as well as if you have, certain taxi as well as graph connectors, you wish to put in a bit more details from that end, from the threat intelligence end. You can also implement this. There are connectors in place for this threat intelligence data as well. All right. So that is really how, on a high level, how everything can eventually be put into Sentinel. But I do get that, just me saying this, it's not very convincing. Some people are a bit more visual. They want a more visual documentation. So on my next slide, I do have, a sample of how things would look like when it comes to, not just within the Microsoft side of things, but when it comes to, the multi-cloud side as well as the hybrid side, how do things look like? So here's a pictorial diagram of how data flow looks like. So on the left, let's start on the left first. So on the left, we have the other CSP providers. So, like your GCP, your Azure, your S3 buckets, everything, as long as you configure the data connector, let's say AWS, for example, as long as you connected the S3 connectors, everything will flow seamlessly into Sentinel. Next is, I'll go through the bottom part, the on-prem settings. So on our on-premise environment, you also see that everything, like I mentioned, right, syslog, CF, all these are supported. As long as you have the agent in place, the log analytics agent in place, and you have configured everything to forward the logs onto Sentinel, it will also work seamlessly. All right, and then on the right side, these are all our native stuff like all our Azure AD, for example, all these logs, right? As long as you configure the data connectors, and it's very easy on the Microsoft side of things. It really is just one click. Later on, we'll take a deeper look into this. So as long as you configure everything, it will all seamlessly flow into Sentinel as well. So this is really the high level, the big picture of how eventually everything will work with Sentinel hand in hand, whichever platform that you are on. Okay. All right, so next is on the visibility piece. So visibility, this falls under that monitoring and detection phase, which I was talking about earlier. So we'll first start off with the visibility segment, followed by intelligence, analytics, and hunting. So what do we mean by visibility within Sentinel, right? So this just means that we are able to deploy our interactive out-of-the-box workbooks. So think of workbooks a bit like, your dashboards, so a bit like your dashboards. How do we visualize our data? How do we visualize these logs? So that is through our workbook feature within Sentinel. You're able to deploy out-of-the-box workbooks alongside creating your own customized visualizations, such as graphs and maps, for example. And through this, we are then provided with deeper insights into one or more of our data sources. Later on, I'll introduce you one of the workbooks which I find very effective. So you can consider it going forward as well. Next is around the intelligence portion, so visibility means, we get that level of visibility on our logs. We get to visualize things. We get to understand better, what exactly is happening in our environment. But what about this intelligence portion within Sentinel? What exactly does it entail? So the intelligence within Sentinel actually refers to, us being able to bring in the different threat indicators, as well as Sentinel being able to classify these alerts and incidents that comes into Sentinel correctly. So we can then use these alerts, we can then set alerts so that we are able to quickly react to these particular incidents that come into our environment, as well as understand what are some of the top threats targeting our organization. All right, so like I keep mentioning, right, there's actually the correlation capabilities within Sentinel. So Sentinel does that correlation alongside machine learning for user entity and behavior analytics available within Sentinel. So that as a whole, we are then able to get good quality insights along with a whole timeline of incidents, as well as what are the impacted entities pertaining to these particular incidents as well. So there is really that whole AI/ML capability within Sentinel. And the best part is you don't have to be the one configuring this AI/ML model. It's already in place for you. So investigation is also simplified once you set up the data connectors, like I mentioned, they do the correlation and everything for you. So investigation is very simplified in the sense that once everything is connected, once everything is set up, there will be links in place for you. So just clicking through the links, they will bring us directly to that data source whereby this incident occurred. Okay, so next is on the analytic piece. So this segment really aims to highlight the AI/ML portion within Sentinel. So like I mentioned, right, Sentinel leverages of the benefit of machine learning without our users having to have machine learning experience or expertise in this area. There are already built-in models which offers our Sentinel users the benefit of machine learning, but without all that machine learning complexity. Okay, so some examples of what is in place already within Sentinel would be built-in models that identify suspicious login throughout your Microsoft identity services. They can help you discover malicious SSH access, brute force attempts, AAD. Within your Azure AD, if there's any anomaly logged in, like if you're an organization based in Singapore, suddenly you get a lot of login attempts based off maybe Siberia or Russia, for example, just off the top of my head, then you're alerted on all these points as well. And the best part is you don't have to be the one configuring all these machine learning capabilities. Like I mentioned, it's already done for you within Sentinel. So all that is required from the user end is really just to set up the Sentinel, and then the machine learning begins from there. So as you can see here, I have this diagram here. So from this diagram, you can see that from all the activities that the users do, so there's a 300 billion identity within Azure, and then within O365, there's about 500 billion within O365, for example. So all of this in turn adds up. So all these activities is then eventually streamlined via that machine learning process to identify what exactly are the incidents which we should be taking a closer look into. So from all these different activities, it's streamlined into just 90 high severity incidents for our security ops team to then dive deeper into. And this is really one of the prime reasons why people tend to lean towards Sentinel, because it eliminates all that false positive alongside reducing the time required for people to actually identify areas of concerns. Okay. So next, there are also there's more than 100 built-in alert rules developed by Microsoft and community security experts that you can choose to deploy in the event that alerts are triggered, playbooks can be automatically run. You're also able to create and build your own analytic rule using KQL queries as well. So later on, there'll be a short demonstration on this portion. It's quite interesting on this point. Hunting. So hunting on Sentinel can be done via the same KQL, which I mentioned earlier, custom query language. This is really one of the main things that you should develop capabilities on if you wish to leverage upon Sentinel a bit more going forward. So let's go over how hunting looks like within Sentinel. So when it comes to threat hunting within Sentinel, there are built-in threat hunting queries developed by Microsoft as well as community experts that you can run and see the results on without prior query experience. Alternatively, you can also choose to run your own threat hunting queries unique to your environment using KQL. But just note that, out of the box, there's already plenty of hunting queries out there for you. And if what is in Sentinel isn't enough, there's actually a whole GitHub community around this, whereby you're able to leverage upon what others have created and use it in your environment. So we are then actually able to further investigate things from the hunting queries that were ran, as the results shown pertaining to the queries will be available for us for further investigation purpose. Right, so next with regards to incidents, so within Sentinel, we are able to visualize attack patterns based off the incident it gathers, alongside using incidents as a trigger for automated playbooks as well. So what do I mean by this? So the incidents created, right? Incidents can be automatically created based off the KQL queries and alerts that we set, or it can be initiated by a security analyst within our team when they are performing threat hunting activities. So both of which we covered a little earlier just now. So the incident can be thought, you can think of incidents a bit like a container of sorts for alerts, events, as well as bookmarks pertaining to a particular security threat. Like for example, if I have people trying to access my environment from a known Tor exit node, then that will be an incident in itself. And then incidents will then actually consist of all the events that has occurred, whatever alerts have been triggered, as well as all the entities impacted within this particular incident itself. So incidents can be assigned to our analysts for further investigation purposes, as well as it can be tracked by us going forward. So triggering of automated playbooks from incidents is possible. So like I mentioned, right, this actually in turn reduces the response time required, as well as the work required from our security operations team end. And then, like I mentioned earlier, so incidents are actually correlated to impacted entities as well as the different data sources, which in turn gives us deeper insights to the whole, to actually how the whole timeline, how the whole attack landscape looks like. We can then explore further by clicking on the respective nodes for more detailed information and expand upon the hunting scope using explorational queries as well. So now we are at the last portion, which is really the automation segment. Within automation, we'll see what exactly are automation rules. How does the automation within Sentinel actually tie in with another product called Logic App? And then we can also see what are some of the playbooks that we can choose to deploy just out of the box, which is available within Sentinel already. So firstly, what are automation rules? So they are actually in place within Sentinel, and they make sure that playbooks run when a certain particular incident is triggered. So you can explicitly define your conditions required before running the playbooks, such as if a certain incident meets a certain rule name, then we'll run it. All right. So you're also able to assign one playbook to multiple rules. So what does this mean for you? This means that you don't have to write multiple playbooks to do the same action. You can actually also control the order of the playbook execution, such as running certain action before the next action as well. So the playbooks themselves, they are powered by Azure Logic Apps, which is fully integrated with Azure Sentinel. You are able to choose from a library of samples. These are the out-of-the-box ones, which I mentioned about. Or you can create your own. There's actually more than 200 over connectors out there for you. Right. So when you are building your own, Logic app for your own playbook for Azure Sentinel, you are able to build automated and scalable playbooks that can actually integrate across different tools and platforms, such as going into our Power BI site, or you can configure this to send an automated email through the Outlook site to notify users impacted by the attack, for example. So it's really scalable in this sense for yourself. You can include whichever tool which pertains to your environment in this case. So here are some samples of playbook options that are already in place for you to deploy. So this will be things like incident management. You can configure it if you have either Jira or ServiceNow in your environment, you can configure it such that you'll open up a ticket on this particular incident, and then you can then track things further within ServiceNow or Jira. Or you can ensure that things are posted within a Slack channel, and this in turn will notify everyone within the security ops team like, hey, there's a high severity incident, please look into it. Right? You can also use it to enhance your investigation capabilities, like automatically look up the geographical location of this impacted IP, for example. Or the more straightforward one, which I see quite a few people using, is to immediately block off the user access and block off that IP which is trying to access our environment. You can also choose to run playbooks to immediately isolate a particular machine which is impacted by this particular incident. So here are some of the samples out there which are already available for you. Do explore it more going forward if you feel like implementing the playbooks to really get that level of automation within Sentinel. Okay, so in summary, Sentinel is able to scale in an infinite manner. You don't have to worry about capacity or do sizing of hardware when you're leveraging off Sentinel. It's very different from the on-prem traditional SIEM in that sense. So integration is also quite simplified with multiple connectors that we have for both, the multi-cloud as well as the on-prem settings. None of this is an issue within Sentinel. Even your external tools, your EDR as well as your other CSPM, your CASBs, everything can be integrated via Sentinel as well. So the machine learning piece within Sentinel is also one of the highlights of Sentinel. It reduces noise, reduces alert fatigues, as well as bring about quality insight, which is the key differentiating factor between Sentinel and the traditional SIEM tools out there. And then we cover a bit on SOAR as well. So SOAR, which is, I'll emphasize it again, which is actually the security orchestration, automation, and response tool. It's actually around the whole dashboarding as well as playbook automation piece, which I covered earlier. This we have covered, how they can be put in place properly, which in turn will reduce the response time required by your organization to respond to such incident and threats happening within your environment. So overall, you can think of Sentinel as not just a simple SIEM, just for you to view the logs, have your SecOps people there viewing the logs every day. It's really not as such. Sentinel has that level of value addedness for you when it comes to the SOAR capabilities, as well as all that machine learning effort being put in place on the back end as well. So you can think of Sentinel as not just your simple SIEM, but also a data lake of logs once everything has been well configured and your single pane of glass. All right. So now I'll go a bit into the demo side of things, but overall, I hope because the demo will take a little bit more time. So I hope that, with this session, with me going through all these different phases within Sentinel and everything, I hope that that actually brought you valuable insights about Sentinel and how it can help your environment. So next, I'll be going through a short demonstration, about 10 minutes, to show you how Sentinel looks like in action. Okay, so give me a second. All right, just want to check, can you view, I think I can view my screen quite all right. Okay, so within Sentinel, so the first portion which we talked about was actually with regards to data connectors, if you recall. So this is really where we start plugging in with the data connectors. This is really where the data ingestion phase starts within Sentinel. So as you can see, I have 37 data connectors connected here. And this is actually not just pertaining towards, all the Azure side of things. So we do have the Azure AD as well as, the Azure Activity configured. But more importantly, so like I mentioned, if you are from a multi-cloud environment, you wish to use Sentinel as a single pane to view across all these different cloud service providers, this option is available for you as well. You just have to ensure that things are either connected to the AWS Cloud Trail, or if you go by the S3 bucket route, everything is locked within S3 bucket and it is then connected via Sentinel as well. There's also the Google Cloud Platform portion, which you can choose to enable going forward. So just to recap a little bit, for data ingestion on the Azure and Microsoft side, the data ingestion is free. So it's only within the third-party ones which you might have to pay a little bit more on the data ingestion portion. All right. So that's on data connectors, the first phase. Next is, I talked about workbooks earlier, right? So next is about the workbooks. So just give it a little bit of time. Okay, so on the workbook side of things, we have all these different workbooks enabled for us. Think of workbooks like I mentioned as your dashboards of sorts. It will show you all the relevant information. So as you can see here, there's plenty of workbooks available for you, just out of the box that which you can implement. So there's about 258 workbooks here. But the example that I'll use here, which I think that you could consider going forward as well, is quite resourceful, is this particular one, the Azure AD Audit, Activity and Sign Logs. This is one which my customers find particularly useful for them. So you can click on the View Save Workbook here. So I'll let you see how this looks like in your when you put it into play. So when you deploy these workbooks, you actually gather. So earlier I showed you the data connector side, right? The data connectors ensures that all my Azure AD information, Azure AD activity logs are all flowing into Sentinel. And from Sentinel, we can then deploy this workbook to get all the insights from the data ingested into Sentinel itself. So after Sentinel has ingested my Azure AD audit, my Azure AD sign-in logs, we can then deploy this workbook to get better insights, because just us reading through that log is not as efficient as us deploying a workbook to really gather all the data and information from the logs. All right. So as you can see here, when we deploy this workbook for this Azure AD audit activity and sign-in log, we are able to view the sign-in logs portion. We are able to view, failed logins, successful logins, as well as on the audit log side, what sort of operations failed, what are the top 10, operations which failed. If we see that, self-service has been failing quite a few times, we can then identify, could there be some issues on this end? All right. We can see our latest operation based off the audit and activity logs, what our users have been doing in our environment. Everything can be viewed quite seamlessly from here. We are also able to view the Azure activities. So this would be, what exactly our users doing, some activities, as well as what are the create, update, delete, or anything like that, which is done by our resource providers. What are some of the actions done? Okay. So on a high level, this is really how the whole workbook adds value to your environment, as well as reduces the amount of fatigue on your end, as well as compared to you trying to view all these logs manually. So this is really the value behind the workbook. So do take note of this particular one on Azure AD Audit Activity and Sign Logs. This is one which my customers find quite useful. All right. So we've covered data connectors, workbook. So next one, I'll cover the analytics portion. Okay. So analytic rules. So in order for us to get the incidents, right? In order for Sentinel to recognize something as an incident, so like I mentioned, you either have to create this analytic rule, or your security operations personnel will have to log something as an incident manually. So of course, us doing it with the rule is a lot more simplified. So what do the analytics rule mean, right? So within this analytics segment, we can actually deploy rules so that when certain event comes in matching these rules, they will be flagged out as an incident. So it looks as such. So as you can see earlier, I mentioned a bit about KQL, Custom Query Language. This is really what defines this particular rule here. All right. So in this particular analytics rule, we are checking for account created and deleted in a short time frame. Why are we checking for this? Because naturally, this is really a red flag for us, right? This is something that we need to be on the ball of, as well as this. So they actually do classify it for you as well, like what the high severity, low severity, and medium severity analytics rule. So we'll look at the high one. So for example, this one, this account created and deleted in short time. So like I mentioned, these are all based off the KQL query rules. You don't have to come up with this rule yourself. You just have to ensure that you're enabling these rules when you come into your Sentinel environment. These rules are out of the box for you. You just have to make sure that you have enabled it. So whether you have enabled it or not is very obvious from a glance. So if it's enabled, means it's active in your environment. And if a particular event come in matching this particular rule query, then this thing will be flagged out as an incident within this portion here. But if you do not have this analytics rule enabled, if it is disabled, then it may not reflect on this particular incidents portion here. So just take note of this. For the incidents to be viewed, you actually have to enable the analytics rule. All right. And it's out of the box. You don't have to configure it yourself or anything. Just make sure that it's enabled and things will work fine. Okay, so this on the analytics rule portion, as well as how that really triggers into the whole incident side of things. So next, let's explore the incidents a little bit. So this is quite fancy. There's actually a whole graph and everything for you. So I'll dive into this portion. So from here, right, we are able to view incidents which is happening in my environment. So as you can see, there's like 132 high severity incidents, 295 medium severity incidents for us to view. Okay, so let me dive a little bit into this. Okay, maybe let's just view this one. So let's view the full details on this and see what kind of insights we can get on this particular incident. All right. So as you can see here, there's a whole timeline. What exactly happened? When was the first occurrence at 8 a.m. and then so for this one, it's all due today. We can also check, who are the impacted entities. So Jeff is the impacted entity here. What is the IP affected by this particular incident? So this incident is pertaining towards, alerts possibly related to data exfiltration. So let's say going forward, I want to view this in depth a little bit more. So we can view the investigate portion, which will then lead us to this graph, whereby we can then click in and view all the individual entities, as well as, what is this particular accident, what is this particular incident about, what is this event, So we have a whole timeline which you can view as well. And then the impacted entities, as well as all the alerts which actually triggered this particular incident. Everything is categorized neatly within this particular incident portion. So going forward, you can then take a deeper dive into things, or perhaps even do your own KQL query to hunt things further within the Sentinel environment pertaining to this particular user, Jeff, for example. All right, and that's really how the whole incident, as well as all the graph side of things, help you further with your investigation process. Okay, so that's on the incident side. Now I'll dive a bit into the hunting before we go into our Q&A. Give me a second. So within hunting, we have a wide range of queries which you can deploy out of the box for you, as well as they are also categorized via the Mitra framework as well. So these queries are all written in KQL, and we can then run these queries to get better insights of incidents that matches these particular queries. So as you can see here, there's also queries for the AWS side of things, for the Microsoft side of things. So let's just dive into one. Okay, so this one is on when things are, so earlier we saw, right, it's actually for my particular environment is integrated with the AWS side of things. So we can actually then run things against the AWS CloudTrail logs. We can then view what are some of the incidents which happen, what are the impacted IPs and accounts for threat hunting purposes. So we can choose to just run the query here as such. So for us today, thankfully, it's 0 incidents. Nothing is happening, nothing weird is happening within our environment. We can also choose to run everything. So we don't have to choose to run it individually. We just have to choose which rules we want to be ran. And then we can run things as such. So things are actually quite simplified on this end when it comes to threat hunting. And then another thing to note is that if you feel that none of this actually matches your needs, right? None of this is in line with what you're currently doing. None of the out-of-the-box ones matches whatever your environment requires. You can actually just choose to create your own query as well going forward. Right? You can choose to create your own query, come up with your own KQL query rule for better hunting purposes. So like earlier, we saw one of the impacted entity was Jeff, right? So going forward, perhaps what I could do is I could run a query, and then I will search on Jeff particularly as an impacted entity to get more information around what Jeff is doing, what are some of the potential malicious activities he has been exposed to, for example. So this really on a high level how the whole hunting query comes into place and how we can get better insights from this hunting side of things. All right, so maybe now I can dive into the Q&A segment. We have a bit more time for the Q&A side of things. Let me view some of the questions here.
Hey, Michelle. So one of the questions, the first question was, do we support the leaf format, which is, I think, the format from QRadar logs?
QRadar.
I know we can integrate with QRadar, but I don't know if we actually leverage all the attributes of leaf format, log format. Do you know by any chance, or?
I think for this, like I mentioned, we do integrate with QRadar, but as for the detailed querying and everything that can be done on this might not be in place within Sentinel currently. You can, however, leverage off the community GitHub for more QRadar integrational piece with Sentinel.
Thank you. The second one, which is a good question as well, is Sentinel able to measure the MTTD and the MTTR? So time to recovery and time to discovery. Do we have workbooks for that, or do you know?
As of now, based on what I know, we don't have that level of measurement for MTTR. Yeah.
Another question, can Sentinel ingest net flow? I believe so.
Yep, it's able to.
Okay. Is there a cap on the number of IOC that Sentinel can store? I don't think so.
No, I don't recall there being a cap for this.
No, I never heard of such a cap, so shouldn't be a limiting factor. Okay, another question. Are we able to provide custom rules into Sentinel to deal with specific conditions that interest us? Is that easily done or require deep coding experience to configure?
So for this, you don't actually require deep coding experience to configure this. You do, however, need to have a certain level of expertise with KQL in order to come up with all these specific conditions. But nonetheless, I always recommend my customers to go to the community GitHub if what out of the box don't fit their need. Go to the community GitHub, and then from there, take whatever queries which is there and then modify it to fit your need. So doing that is actually easier, a lot easier than you starting from scratch, as well as doing that actually requires less coding experience as well.
Thank you. Another question. So I think asking if we have any reference about the percentage of improvement in Sentinel that we can derive from essentially flagging less false positive compared to another product. I haven't seen anything. I think it's kind of hard to do a side-by-side to see how many false positive will be filtered out by Sentinel. Do you have any info about that? Or?
As of now, we don't have documentations around this. We do have documentation around the costing side though, but as for the false positives, etc., there really isn't that reference around this.
Yeah, because you would have to compare with the different tools, and then you have to essentially do that with whatever 10 or 20 tools on the markets, which operate a slightly different way. Okay. This one we talked about it. So there is a question regarding data residency. So the questions, if you are working on-prem and you send your on-prem logs to the cloud into Sentinel, how does that work, and what's the risk for data being stored in the cloud in Singapore, for example? So I have one comment, I think, just to remind everyone, you should never have any PII information in your logs, ever. So that's a thing to look at. So you should always make sure you either it's not present in your log in the first place on-prem, or that you anonymize or tokenize your logs or some information in the logs when you send them to Sentinel, because I think otherwise you will be in trouble even from a pure regulatory standpoint. But yeah, once you send them to Singapore, whether it's sent to Sentinel or any kind of storage on the Sentinel data, on the Singapore data center, that will remain within the boundaries of Singapore data residency. So you can actually process the data there. We have several customer public services and so on that are using Sentinel, and there are very strong requirements on data residency to ensure that all the logs and any data that is sent to Sentinel remains within Singapore. So that's something we can cover. Okay, let me have a quick look and see if there are any new questions. Okay, a few new questions. Can Sentinel data connector be used to ingest from other Azure tenants?
Yep, so it can actually ingest from your Azure tenant. It's just that you might have to do a little bit more configuration on this end to ensure that everything is seamlessly pushing into the Sentinel side of things. So one suggestion around this would actually be around using leveraging of Azure Lighthouse if you want to manage multiple tenants with Microsoft Sentinel.
Thank you. So there is a clarification on the discussion we were talking about improvement. So I think there was a slide initially in the presentation where we talked about improvement number, and I think there was a 79% maybe mentioned somewhere. And I think that's what the question is about, is how do we derive the number when we talk about this improvement? Does it ring a bell?
Earlier it was on cost though. Let me bring it up. Yep. Maybe it's on this slide. Let me share a little bit more. Okay. So maybe what the audience was asking around this one, right? Yep. So it's based off the ESG data report. But this is more along the lines of, us having the challenges which the SOCs are facing. And then the other one would be this particular one. I think, yeah, this is where the number came from. All right, so it is through the Forrester Consulting report, but unfortunately, this does not match Sentinel against other forms of SIEM products out there. This is just purely based off what Sentinel is having right now.
Another question, does Microsoft have access to my logs in my Sentinel, or are they private to my tenant? That's a frequent question.
So yep, so it's actually private to yourself. Microsoft does not really have that kind of leverage upon your logs, right?
Yeah. And they will be encrypted and so on, and only you will have the keys, so no one can actually access.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of other questions. I think I will take some of them. So the first one is if we can use a repository to version Sentinel. So I think Michelle has been talking a lot about all the different things you can customize, either pull from someone else's repo, whether it's connectors and custom connectors and policies and playbooks and workbooks. So all of that can actually indeed be versioned, and you can put that into a repository so that if you want to deploy that, if you want to essentially provide Sentinel as a service to multiple organizations, you can use this versioning and then redeploy Sentinel configuration very easily towards another Sentinel instance for one of your customers. That's something we can do. This one we answered. Okay, so one question I think was around, are we essentially using Sentinel at Microsoft within Microsoft? So we are indeed, I think around a year ago, maybe a bit less than a year ago, Microsoft SOC operations actually switched to Sentinel from a variety of different tools that they were using before. So now all the Microsoft entities, whether it's internal ITs or all the employees worldwide connecting with their laptop, with their device and phones and so on, as well as all the cloud services, everything, each of these SOC team is actually leveraging Sentinel for their operations, which is the best way for us, again, to see how the product can scale and ask for product improvements as well. Okay. Another question about failure of SIEM project. We have seen indeed some customers being worried about the effort and what would be the success rate of the implementation of SIEM solution, whether it's Sentinel or something else, but mostly SIEM, cloud-based SIEM. I think the key issue we have seen so far is really it's very easy to activate Sentinel. You just essentially click a few buttons and then logs start flowing into Sentinel. So we see lots of customers essentially activating all those logs and then essentially having all this fire hose of information coming into Sentinel without having first thought about the strategy and what to do, what they want to monitor, and what do they want to prioritize. Because again, you have limited resources, your SOC will be staffed to a certain number of people, so you can't analyze everything. You can't have 200 workbooks to look at every single situation. So I think one of the failure is really just thinking that a SIEM is just activating a button and just pushing logs and everything else will work. It's not the case. You have to really have a strategy. And if you don't have a team internally, you can actually work on setting up this strategy. I'm sure we have partners, or you can work with Microsoft as well, to make sure you go step by step and really, it's a journey, and you want to define the journey properly. Because the thing that Sentinel, I think Michelle talked about it, is really it's heavily based on AI to try to help people and essentially flag and see and look at the things that actually matter to them. And there is a lot of automation. But even if we have all this level of automation, we have to keep in mind that the human skills and the human aspect of it, of the hunting, of essentially collaborating as well through this tool, remains something that is really key to be successful running a SIEM solution. Again, it's not fully automated. You just click a box and everything works well. You can easily, through the community, get a lot of information and dashboard. But at the end of the day, if no one consumes this dashboard and act upon this dashboard, and there is no process behind it, it won't be successful. And finally, I think the other thing that we saw from some customer pulling out from SIEM project is the pricing. So, and again, you have to take a bit of time to look at how much data you're going to be sending, what's going to be the price behind it, and what's going to be your strategy. So lots of the logs, as Michelle mentioned, are going to be free out of the box between Microsoft solutions and Office 365, for example. But after 90 days, all the other logs, you have to have a strategy. Do you archive them? Do you keep them hot? Do you keep them on separate storage? Microsoft has many solutions to ensure you can actually keep logs for a very, very long duration, because we've seen in the past with SolarWinds that the attackers will usually breach your system months in advance before they start doing the exfiltration. So you want to have that information available for you to actually do threat hunting and not just run on the last 3 months. Okay, there's been a few other questions coming up in the meantime. This is very specific. Not sure if we can get an answer right now. Well, Microsoft released Workbooks for security alerts that you release during Patch Tuesday to alert us proactively should new zero-day threats are available. So we do provide workbooks and playbooks as soon as we identify new threats. So for Log4j, for example, as soon as this was identified, I think within 24 hours, there were new rules that were available within Sentinel for you to consume. You actually don't have to wait for the patch Tuesday to see them. So as soon as we have something and it's critical, it will end up there, or any new CVE that is essentially noteworthy. We'll use that, and it's going to be visible in Sentinel. There was a question about DR for Sentinel, replication. So I don't know exactly how that works. I'm sure there is a redundancy between data centers and regions and so on. Probably not regions, but at least data center within the same availability zone. I unfortunately don't have enough detail to be able to answer that. Is data ingestion free and unlimited? So do you want to remind again the part that is free and the part that is not free, Michelle?
So only the Microsoft as well as a native Azure data connectors, only for this data ingestion free on this end. So if we are talking about the third-party products or with the other CSPs, for example, these are unfortunately not free.
Okay, thank you. And then there is the question about the default retention period. So I think it's 90 days, right? Yeah, that's the default period.
Yeah. There's actually a range. There's actually a good range. You can actually choose to extend it all the way to 720 days as well. But of course, you got to take the costing into consideration when we are talking about the retention period. So definitely do work out, what would be the best golden point between, between the cost as well as how long you wish to retain data for.
Yeah. And again, back to what's your strategy? If you want to retain so much data,
Yes.
do you have analysts who will actually look at the data and look at the logs going, whatever, 1 or 2 years before? Because if you don't have any workbook, if you don't have any plan, then yeah, you can just essentially zigzag and store that onto cold storage. That will cost you almost nothing until you define one day a specific need for that. Okay. Without posting, we have 3 minutes left. Is there anything else I missed? I think we covered most of them. One question, there was one question about prioritizing SIEM versus other security products, which is also something that we talk about with our customer. SIEM and Sentinel are very interesting, very exciting, and we see lots of people interested in rolling out this kind of solution, either moving to a cloud-based SIEM or just essentially implementing a SIEM for the first time. Because again, it's very easy to activate and it's essentially very trendy as well. However, we really try to make sure that when talking with security team, that we prioritize maybe other activities before that. I think it's quite important before you start collecting logs and having information that you do some groundwork on reducing your existing attack surface. So, for example, we have Defender for Cloud that will give you a picture of all your different services running multi-cloud and hybrid, and where you can increase your security posture. That's something you should be doing probably before implementing a SIEM, because these are concrete actions that will make sure you're actually more secure. The SIEM doesn't create security. It helps you identify weaknesses or potential improvement, but it's not going to fix anything. Whereas if you work with, for example, Defender for Cloud, that will actually give you exact, precise practice that you can implement to fix this. What you should do before the SIEM as well is make sure you actually have the logs flowing or available. So activate syslogs and any other solution you have so that you can actually use those logs later on. I think that's quite important. And the last one, which is a large project in its own, it's really the core part around identity. So Michelle talked about it, but it's really important as well that you have a solid identity foundation first before you go further into SIEM. I think that's, if I were to prioritize this, I really would go on the zero trust journey and making sure you have a solid Again, identity foundation with implementing least privilege access. I think these are the things that you want to spend your energy on, because again, that will be concrete actions that will actually make sure your baseline is secure. All right, and I think that's it. We have 30 seconds left, so we will close. Any last word, Michelle, on your side?
Not so much on my side, maybe just, in the event that the audience have any questions going forward, feel free to reach out to us via our LinkedIn pages or anything like that. Just reach out to us, happy to help answer questions which they might have. And so along the lines of feedback, please do provide us with your feedback on this session via this QR code here. Do note that you can also choose to, going forward, the recordings, right, as mentioned, they are available for you to view on demand, to better digest the information at your own time. Right?
Perfect.
Yep,
thank you, Michelle.
Thank
and thank you everyone for joining. You have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.